This would definitely be considered a lazy week. Not only is it week 17, but it falls within the holidays. It's literally this year during the holiday week. Like everybody just had Christmas that celebrates or whatever holiday they celebrate. It's been a busy week for a lot of people. So it's just going to be trust the projections, move a few pieces around, and hope to get lucky.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, is the Week 17 DraftKings Picks. If you are listening to the audio podcast of this show, stay tuned at the very end because Tambo and I will take a brief look at the Saturday slate as well. That'll be its own separate video on Mayo Media Network, so subscribe to that, smash the like while you're here, do all that fun stuff, and do want to let you know that the race for the Mayo Cup one and done is already 37% full now, $250 to play. I gave away the free Christmas Day entry. All you have to do, and all you had to do, was screenshot me your entry that you've bought already, and you get into a draw for another one. The next draw is coming on Christmas Day, and I'll have some golf content coming out over the weekend, including, Tambo, my best ball player rankings, 1 through 100.
Yeah, best ball's back, baby. We're good to go. PGA's coming back next week. We're excited about it. So I did some stuff with my guy, Degenerate 75. I know you got some stuff upcoming as well on your end, but it's going to be good. And everyone's starting in the best ball streets now. So you'll see a ton of logos up there as well from Ship It Nation. Everyone's starting to dive in.
Yeah, so use code Mayo at Underdog. To get it on the NFL, you get some free picks for NFL, and you'll get all of that deposit bonus of up to $1,000 to go spend on PGA Best Ball. We've already had a strategy show out. I'll re-up that. I'll be doing some drafts over the weekend, and I'll have my player rankings. The player rankings are so ludicrous, Tambo, when I did it all out. Like, Siwoo Kim is number 5.
Yeah, your boy. It's probably because it's all you. It's your bias.
Yeah, I mean, he also plays in every, shit tournament there is, so that's the optimal thing you can have in best ball.
Yeah, there's a certain strategy to it. I'm glad you brought that up because that's kind of the key, and everyone could go watch the content for it. But like you said, that's definitely something versus just drafting the best guys. There's a bigger strategy to the whole thing that some have caught on to and some not so much. So that could be a bit of the edge in the lobby there.
Yeah, I'll have a few 5 or 6. I'll have a separate video on this. It'll be super short. I don't know if it'll make the pod feed if people are looking for it because it might be a short video, or maybe I'll throw it on the research show or the show that I do with Jeff for the betting on Monday. But yeah, Rory is undraftable. It's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just fun. But to everybody else that doesn't know that, it's like, hey, how is this guy still sitting around here? Let me get this guy. And then you're up against that. So can be a good lucrative spot right now to get involved in the PGA Best Ball streets.
Yeah, so code Mayo up there right now, and I'll have some underdog picks for Week 17 as well, probably Saturday and Sunday as we go through it. I don't know if I'll have the regular Saturday show just because football is going to be going on. I don't know how many people are going to tune in to watch that, but I'll have a brief injury update at least in the newsletter, so you can sub to that for free. The optimal lineup for week number 17, we have Anthony Richardson at quarterback, paired with his guy, Josh Downs, Bucky Irving and Adam Thielen as a mini correlation in there as well, Aaron Jones at running back, Saquon in the flex with Eagles D, and then you have Kelvin Ridley and Juwan Johnson to round out this lineup. Can't say I'm a big fan of having any Saints with Spencer Rattler at quarterback in any lineup.
That's the thing. At least it's him, and it's only 3,500. If you are going to use up a onesie position, like we always talk about it, I certainly get it. There's other guys there. If you can find $100, I know some people like Chig, and it would be kind of similar, Pat, to the combo play where everyone just plays Brian Thomas Jr. and Strange. You can just play Ridley and Chig and hope that they rack it up as a combo pack or mix in their quarterback. But I just think in general, that's kind of what we're looking at here to start it off. This is a pretty correlated optimal, but that'll happen on week 17 when there's only 8 games to run through.
Yeah, 8-game slate is tough. I know that you always prefer the larger slates, don't you?
The larger, the better. Usually if you have, some sort of process of your own or back end or where you can get to more things and find more angles than when it's a shorter slate. Obviously on something like Showdown or a 2-game, these short slates with Christmas and everything, where people are like, oh, I was so close. I was just a 2v2 away. So were a lot of people because there's only so many plays in the pool. So I don't know. 8 is kind of fun. It's the sweet spot, but the split on it is 6 and 2. So it's not ideal from that perspective. Like a 4-4 or a 5-3 would obviously be better with more opportunity and late swap involved, but still fine with this. I mean, we're going to talk through it. I think it's a good slate.
Well, it was a good slate for you was Thursday Night Football.
You know what? It was great. And I'm nobody cares work harder. I live by it. But did you know that I lost first on that interception instead of just batting it down for 52,000 more dollars on top of that. So we're grateful, happy to get the King of the Desert seat and ship the $100 single entry for 20K. But it was a rough sweat. I was kind of worried, and then that happened, and I was thinking I was going to lose a bunch. It turned out to still be pretty good consolation prize, so I appreciate it.
So how does the King of the Desert work this year? Do you have to win another qualification to get to go to Phoenix?
Yeah, it's similar to, it's actually one up. They did bring it in last year, but it was similar to how I've done the King of the Beach stuff, where that was only 2 rounds. King of the Desert is 3 rounds. So it's 150 down to 50, and then 50 down to 20. 20 go live to Arizona and play in a showdown contest with 500K up top at the Super Bowl.
That's awesome. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It's in Arizona. I should say the contest that we're playing in is for the Super Bowl slate, but you're in Arizona with all the King of the Desert qualifiers from both NFL and PGA, so it's pretty sweet.
And it's at the DK Sportsbook at Waste Management, I think, right?
Yeah, you betcha. Yeah, you could come down to this one, Pat. It's warm there. It's nice. It's not super far to travel to. This could be the spot, man. This could be the one.
I'll see if I can qualify. I have my doubts about that. If I'm actually, maybe it'll probably have to be golf. So we'll get into that next week. We'll talk about football right now. Just ownership for like on an 8-game slate. What's your, because we talk through like 2-game slates all the time, 3-game slates. Obviously on Saturday, there's going to be a 3-game slate, but an 8-game slate's kind of weird. How do you try to get different on a slate like this? Because obviously ownership is going to be far more condensed. Like I'm seeing Brian Thomas, right around 30%, Achane around 30%, Hubbard around 30%, Bucky Irving around 25%, Aaron Jones is going to be pretty high up there as well, Mike Evans. It seems like that Carolina-Tampa Bay game is just full of players that people are owning. And of note, Adam Thielen popped up with a hamstring injury on Thursday. No word yet on like the extent of it, but I mean, that's why he went on injured reserve earlier this year. There could be a spot here where he doesn't play.
Yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on that for sure. That's another thing. I mean, week 18 gets even worse, obviously, but week 17, still got to keep an eye on this stuff. And then just to your original question, really a couple ways. One, it goes back to my classic saying that I always have of it's not who you play, it's how you play them. You're really looking to put together things because, like I said, you even see it with the optimal where it looks pretty correlated. You're like, damn, that's actually a pretty nice lineup. A lot of things will look like that because a lot of these plays just fall together. It's putting them together in the right way while considering the other stuff going on the slate, like who's getting the ownership, where the games are at. And then it's another thing too, Pat, especially with 8 games, it's you're hoping that a lot of things where people are in the right place, but the wrong guy. And then you can move around and find leverage that way so that your lineup still feels like it hits. When it hits, it feels like chalk hit. And everyone's like, oh, it was all right there, but everyone was in the wrong place and you moved it around to get a little bit different. So that's kind of what we're looking for when we go throughout.
How does ownership differ trying to track it on a week like this where there is a full Saturday slate? Obviously, there's a holiday. There's already been games. The content streets aren't bountiful at the moment, as I can tell by the Pat Mayo Experience being a top 5 podcast in both the United States and Canada right now, simply because I was releasing shows. So thank you all for that. And I am doing a one-and-done free entry giveaway for anyone who subscribes, leaves a rating and review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. So I'm doing that'll be just one of those are being given away. The 3 of them are going to be saved for the people who actually paid to get in to get the extra entry. But if you don't want to pay the $250, I think it's worth it for $7 a week for the entire season. But if you're trying to get just a free entry, leave a rating and review on the audio podcast and sub to Mayo Media Network on YouTube. Those will all get you ballots into a draw in order to get in. But I'm just running through right now. And is ownership really going to be predicated on basically exactly off optimizers and everything like that, rather than seeing an optimizer, getting it through the minutia of injuries, having some content come around to it to accurately project it, or is it just a lazy week?
Yeah, I was just you took the words out of my mouth. You've heard me talk about it in the PGA streets. I know we got our golf show coming back here soon to kick things off, but just to note it, this would definitely be considered a lazy week. Not only is it week 17, but it falls within the holidays. It's literally this year during the holiday week. Like everybody just had Christmas that celebrates it or whatever holiday they celebrate. It's been a busy week for a lot of people. So it's just going to be trust the projections, move a few pieces around and hope to get lucky. For the majority, casuals, same thing, just clicking buttons. Let me just get some action in. And then it can be overwhelming too, Pat, because people had a lot of slates this week. They got a Christmas Day slate, 2-gamer. They got the Thursday night football game. We're going to hit that 3-gamer at the end for Saturday and touch on it a little bit. And now it's a shorter 8-game slate. So probably feel like they're in a pretty good spot just to punch in a bunch of these lineups. And I think that's it. If you can take that to what it is, that's why I think you're going to find some lineups where you're on the right spot. the wrong guy because we're going to be able to get pretty good leverage off some of these higher owned spots.
Just quickly looking at running back with ownership, everyone's getting kind of a bunch this week, except for James Cook, who projects always as like below 5%. Tony Pollard, he pops up on the injury report again. He's only right around 5%. Jerome Ford, 2%. There is an ownership cliff once you get to Rico Dowdle at $6,000 because he's projected right now for 12%. Everyone else below him in the single digits. Like, is there anyone down there that you can see? Like, would you go back to Kendry Miller and hope this game is closer?
You can. He's certainly a spot, like especially if we'll see as the week goes on. But if Jawan Johnson's going to keep getting popular just to fill up that tight end spot, then that would be an example. Yes, where everyone using him has the money to spend on these running backs that we see in the optimal, versus you'd be able to flip the build naturally and then be able to see what that looks like on paper once you do that. And maybe we'll see that later on. Obviously, we got to talk later about these games, but like Buffalo at home, big favorites, Josh Allen, MVP push, all of those things. I mean, there's different ways to go here than just what fell into the optimal.
And looking at the optimal leverage, which is the projected ownership, or it's actually the optimal rate percentage of 10,000 lineups minus the projected ownership, like no one is even close to Barkley. He's 13.4% in optimal leverage, and then it's Jerome Ford and James Cook after him.
Okay. So, I mean, the two you mentioned after him are down the board huge, like you mentioned, right? No one's even touching them. They're down 1 to 5% range and popping a little bit in the projections, yet not getting the ownership. So, James Cook's always going to be a step behind, like you mentioned, when you have the Bucky Irvings for cheaper, the Aaron Jones is $1,000 cheaper, and then it's not that much more to get up to Barkley. But yeah, in general, I think you've nailed it, and that's kind of what it looks like on my end as well.
Well, let's start with some games to try to build out some lineups then. Where would you like to start? And Minnesota's an indoor game. Tampa's a warm weather game, I suppose. New Orleans is indoors, and Jacksonville is somewhat warm weather as well. Not to say there's not going to be scoring in some of these other games, but that's almost where I would try to be going at the onset. Do you want to do Carolina, Tampa Bay, since so much ownership seems to be going around there?
Yeah, I'm good with that. The other one I was going to mention for after, we'll definitely get to it, but is obviously Green Bay, Minnesota is one of the only two afternoon games. Has a big total. It's actually currently about the same as this Carolina Tampa Bay, yet seems like not many people are landing there. So this one, obviously, we know what's happening already with Bucky that we talked about. Chuba Hubbard always gets love. I think he ends up coming in a little less as the week goes on. That's typically the way. But then you've got the Thielen situation that you mentioned where he's popular right now. But if he doesn't play, it just makes somebody else even more popular. So I do think this is a good place and a place where a lot of people end up.
Bucky Irving, Mike Evans, Jalen Coker.
Coker still looks good at 4,300. I'll definitely say that, but it's also looks like he's getting a bunch of ownership as well. I guess, are people going to play, and it looks like they are, Bryce Young, or are they going to play more Baker Mayfield here?
They probably play Baker Mayfield, I would guess, but let me just take a look at the ownership projections for quarterbacks right now. It seems to be pretty spread out from what I can tell. Anthony Richardson, it's Bryce Young right now. Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, Sam Darnold, Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield. So 2 of the top 5 of the 16 quarterbacks on this slate. 2 of them are from this game in terms of ownership.
Yeah, so that's something to think about. I guess the main thing I would say is, again, we'll get the Thielen news is interesting because you already brought it up, and I'll go back to it. But if he's in, it's still, to me, pretty condensed on that side of the ball. So if you want to talk about a way to get different with Bucky, it's just, again, overstack it a little bit further. It seems like a lot of people are playing Bucky. A lot of people are going to play Thielen. We see it in the optimal as a secondary stack, but how many people are going to play Bryce Young, Coker, Thielen with Evans and Irving, for example, right? And it's only an 8-game slate. So that's the type of slate where this stuff can happen. And you can take Evans out of that and just use Bucky, or take Bucky out of it and just fill up your wide receiver slots. But I definitely think overstacking this game, as it may seem popular, it doesn't actually seem like people will go the distance. And that's when you can get ahead, because people say, well, I got Bucky and I got Thielen or whoever it is, right? But I didn't have all the rest of the stuff. I didn't go all the way. And that's where the difference lies.
Not sure about the status of Xavier Legette in this game either. So if he is out, David Moore, I think actually becomes a pretty decent play regardless, because Coker will be on the field, Moore will be running the Legette routes, and then Thielen will end up being in the slot. You'll see all 3 of them out there. And from what I can tell from watching the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you can throw on them.
Yes, you definitely can. I was going to say that's the perfect setup for this matchup too, is if you're looking at stuff, it's going to be, and we're week 17 now. It's about as good as a sample size as you can get in a sport like NFL, where there's only so many weeks of the same personnel and sort of the injuries and all the stuff that's played out. But the Buccaneers can get passed all over, and the Panthers can get ran all over. So that's the Bucky Irving with the Carolina stack would make the most sense.
Payne Durham might end up starting at tight end once again for the Buccaneers because Cade Otton has yet to practice this week. Obviously, Friday will tell the story on his injury status. He's $2,900. Like, if you're going to overstack this game anyway, do you just throw him in to fill up the onesie position?
I'd definitely be fine with him. And also, too, if you are going to flip it and go with Baker, because you can stack Baker with Bucky for sure. We know this. We watched it all season. We've even seen games where it becomes Bucky with the tight end. Remember those Bucky Irving, Cade Otton games where nobody else got involved, and that was sort of the setup here. And I think Sterling Shepard is doubtful. I know there's a little bit of talk and murmur around Jalen McMillan down the stretch and how good he's been playing. So the Tampa side can be stacked, and it could just be Baker with two of Evans, McMillan, Durham. And if you want to go the extra step, you could mix in Bucky into that. But if you're trying to leverage Bucky, I don't mind doing it with just the passing game here and going the Baker side. Then you can still use your guy Thielen if he plays, or Coker or Moore or whoever you want on the other side, and you're already more than different enough, but still on a popular game, to your point.
I think doing it right now, Coker is probably the safest play in terms of how we're constructing a lineup. He's $4,300. He solves a lot of problems that way. We pair him with a super cheap tight end and Payne Durham, and hopefully Cade Otton doesn't play. If Otton plays, obviously you're not going to play Payne Durham. You can just blow up this lineup and throw it into the trash and create a new one. But Coker's going to play either way, regardless of whether Leggett plays, whether Thielen plays, how limited they are. Coker's going to be the other guy on the field.
Yes. Yeah, I like the current build you have set up as a sort of leverage build. We know Bucky is going to be popular, but also when we put into these other lineups, Pat, and we're starting with different quarterbacks, it is going to be Bucky falling into those lineups as a way to get a piece of this game. They're 8-point favorites at home. I do think like the way you set it up is nice because it's a double flip, right? You're leveraging off the Bucky ownership. Obviously, another way to do it would be to play him with the stack, but I also think more people stack the Carolina side than the Tampa Bay side, and the ownership shows that currently right now as well.
Do we just throw Bucky and Hubbard in this and just do a complete stack of this game?
If somebody wanted to, I wouldn't fault them. Like I said, I just think that's what typically happens on the short slates, is where people say, I was in the right place, I had these right guys, they crushed, but they had the most common guys that were going to crush, and they didn't go up and above and over the top. And then what happens in these tournaments is they're already in trouble going into the afternoon because they're passed by all the Baker lineups with Durham and Evans, that they only have a couple of the pieces in that game. So I'm fine if you want to overstack it, but I don't know if it would be those guys all going into it.
Well, let's jump to that game that you talked about earlier, the Minnesota and Green Bay game, the last game of the slate. Like you mentioned, it's not drawing as much ownership as the Tampa Bay and Carolina game. Which side do you prefer? Do you like the Darnold side or the Love side?
Well, they're both good, but the D in Darnold seems to stand for doubles, because it's been like Darnold, Jefferson, Addison at least 2 or 3 times in the past 4 weeks or whatever that we've seen it. So I think you can just stack it up. It just, how much money do you get to after? That's what I'm looking at, same as you are on that screen, being out of studio. So just seeing here. If you just start with those 3, who do you want as the run back? Who's your choice?
Well, Romeo Doubs is the single best wide receiver optimal leverage play per run the sim, so I'm good with going with him.
Okay.
And he's $5,100.
Yeah, I like that build. Or shell, if you will, for what we're doing here, because typically, like, again, we talk about this all the time, but I like filling out the wide receiver spots on a game and then seeing what fits. We have cheap tight ends that we can use. And it's not like there's a bunch of high-priced tight ends that we're worried about. That's the other angle of it, is it's less that you're going up against to have to beat. And then we also have cheap Ds. So we should be able to get some money in this lineup if we build that out later. And I'm good with it, especially with the Dubs call. So 47.80 left right now, and we haven't even put the 2 cheapies in for the onesie positions at tight end and D.
We haven't. Is there any running back you would trust in this game? Because obviously the optimal spit out Aaron Jones. I think that Josh Jacobs, I don't want to say he's safe in this game, but I really like him on underdog receiving total over in games where it's a bit more competitive. And you just see it against Minnesota because they just bring so much heat at the quarterback that you have the way to beat. We saw Kenneth Walker pick up like 7 catches in the first half against them last Sunday night, that you have to get the ball out quickly. So maybe it's a Jaden Reed game, maybe it's a Josh Jacob game on these low A-dot throws, and then Romeo will be the guy down the field and in the end zone that you're looking for. Like, would you throw another guy into this?
You could. I don't need it for right now. I think I like the leveraging of Aaron Jones, but the interesting thing on Jacobs, what you mentioned, like the price is insane on paper to me, 8,100, But then you go back and look and just, he's a walking 22 to 23 points with the upside for 25 to 32 and some bigger games in there. So it's tough matchup on paper, but the way they just might end up using him, it's been pretty dominant for, a long enough stretch now for Josh Jacobs that I definitely consider him for sure.
Yeah, I mean, 20, 18, 19.1, 18.8 or
But pull his game
splits.
log there. It's more
And
than that. Yeah.
It's been getting better. I mean, the lowest he scored was actually against New Orleans on Monday night, and he was taken out of that game so early. He still scored 21 DraftKings points.
Yeah, so it might be one of these spots because I don't see heavy ownership there, and I do like flipping the build from that perspective too. Another way to go against when everyone's on Aaron Jones, it can easily flip. Green Bay is the favorite in this game. So you could definitely see it flip. It's just more of a price factor, right? It's 1,900 more to go up to Josh Jacobs. That's where people are stumbling with it. But it wouldn't shock anybody if Josh Jacobs was to have a good game here and continue on with the streak that you just looked at there of 20 plus points DraftKings games, and you're kind of paying up for probability because it's going to be half the ownership of Aaron Jones most likely.
So Love is about half the ownership of Darnold right now. Is it because it's too hard to figure out which Packers to play with him?
That's typically what it is. Yeah, people don't want to take that risk. Realistically, though, just going to it, I don't hate what you said earlier about Jaden Reed. We already like Romeo. So if you put in, you want a different way to use Aaron Jones, it's to go Jordan Love, Reed, Dobbs, and then Aaron Jones. And really only Aaron Jones is holding ownership in that lineup. You know what I mean? Like that's the only guy. The other guys are way less owned across the board. And it's tricky because it could be anybody on that team. It could end up being Kraft that gets 2 touchdowns or something like that. But I don't mind. One thing I will say, Pat, it's an 8-game slate. It's not an 11 or a 13-game slate. I don't mind overstacking Love. Like that lineup you have there, I wouldn't mind adding Tucker Kraft and just seeing whatever. And if you get beat by somebody else, I know Watson's questionable, whatever it might be, Josh Jacobs on the ground like we talked about, if you get beat by that, so be it. But this lineup still has almost 6K left, and we haven't put a cheap D in yet. You can do a lot with this lineup. I really like the overstack in this spot.
Do you think it'd be worth it to play Jacobs with Love? Because I just talked about the receiving game where he might be able to see in this spot that maybe you just fluke out and you get the Love to Jacobs passing touchdown, then you need both of them.
It's certainly possible. It's just the tricky is like what is his targets? Like 3 or 4 a game. So it's kind of like you need one of those to be for a touchdown. It's obviously very possible. It's just the tricky is, getting a little bit different with it. I don't mind doing this because then I can still fit in a Bucky Irving if I want, because while Bucky and Jones are a very popular combo on this slate, how many are doing it with 4 Green Bay players, including the quarterback Jordan Love, and setting it up, right? So I think it's more for me just leaving that spot open than killing it off with that and trying to get the Green Bay points out of those guys.
If you weren't going to stack this game up and build out a shell, do any of the defenses interest you?
I think, yeah. I think it would be Green Bay. I'm fine with them. They've been good all season. They're getting a little bit of steam, but not too much. And obviously Darnold can come right back down to earth. We've seen that plenty of times throughout the season, kind of been waiting on it again. There was the one game that they were joking about him seeing ghosts again. And, from there, it's been kind of good. But, yeah, this team here, 17, 15, 12, 8, they're putting up DraftKings points these last 4 or 5 games, 6 weeks, whatever it might be. So I don't mind Green Bay at just 2,700, and it really goes against the Aaron Jones ownership too, right? That's the main thing here.
So we have those 2 games, a 49 total, a 48.5 total. The next highest total on this slate is Jets and Bills, with the Bills as 9-point favorites with basically very little left to play at this point, because if they can just win this game, they'll stay ahead of Baltimore. They just need to not lose 2 in a row and have Baltimore win next week. Then they would lose the 2 seed. The Ravens would jump up to number 2 and pass them. But let's say that they end up winning. Let's say they start blowing out the Jets in this game, and then they sit Josh Allen. Now, sometimes we say, that's a great thing. I mean, Lamar got there regardless, but none of his pieces came along for the ride with him. I guess maybe Mark Andrews on the Christmas Day slate, but no one else. Like everyone else went under their totals except for Derrick Henry. It was Derrick Henry, Lamar, and a little bit of Mark Andrews because he had one nice broken play pass for like 50 yards, then ended up catching a touchdown. Like that was it for him. Like, what do you make of the Bills side of it? Do you like it at all, or would you just go to the Jets?
Well, I would say that the thing about that is it's different because it was just a Christmas Day slate with only 2 games. So that obviously allows us to get away with like a Mark Andrews there because it's one play, one guy in 2 games. This one here, to your point, it's kind of like just decide if you got the money for Josh Allen and build differently. And then honestly, I would just probably leave it at that. It gets really tricky to try and pair him up with who it's going to be. He's still reaching out to a lot of different guys. You've seen it if you watch these games. So I'm not really worried as much about the blowout because I think he'll be a big part of causing it, but there is still 8 games. So trying to figure out Shakir, Cooper, Hollins, whoever, Keon Coleman, the 2 or 3 tight ends, because Quentin Morris on the bench, whatever, on top of Knox and Kincaid and all these other guys, it just gets really tricky. So if you're doing it, I like something like Allen and maybe a tight end or pick a receiver, or just go Allen naked. I don't know how much I love the Rodgers side of it. What's your take on the Jets?
I don't really. It seems like a good spot. To be honest with you, because the Bills' defense has been lacking. Paul, is their defense coming back this week at all or not? Their secondary.
I mean, our defense has kind of been back, and it's just been like Milano came back, and like the defense kind of fell off of a cliff.
Yeah, but he didn't play last week. Like against New England last week, they were down 2 corners and a safety.
Yeah. I haven't looked at the injury report close enough.
Yeah, I mean,
I just
Rodgers.
assume that they're going to score like 25 plus points on us, and we're going to have to score 30.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then Rodgers would end up becoming a pretty good play then, Tambo, because he'll have to throw the ball a ton.
Yeah, it's tricky, man. I like Josh Allen. I like Josh Allen and pick one. I
like
actually
Cook.
don't mind
I like Cook.
James Cook in the D. That's where I was going next. Yeah, James Cook with the D, and just hope that gets the job done. And I guess the big thing is they are just continuing to go now on the Rodgers side to Devontae Adams, right? We're looking at 12, 11, 12, and 13 targets. Now that they're, done, it's just a matter of Aaron Rodgers making it look good that he went and got Devontae Adams, and now he's getting him involved like crazy. So I guess if you're doing anything here, you could do that. You could run like a $5,700 Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams with James Cook and hope the game goes that way.
I mean, I don't hate that. That could work. Because we've seen.
I think it's fine because you're still in a pretty big game here where if it does get going on that side, it's Rodgers and his guys pushing them, but hopefully it's James Cook on the ground and not Josh Allen, because then you've got the wrong build.
The problem with James Cook is we've seen these very high upside games, and maybe it doesn't matter as much if he has the bad game, because his bad game is going to be like 4 points, 5 points, because Ty Johnson is used or Ray Davis is used. But the games where he does go off, you kind of need him to come through because he'll score 35 DraftKings points for you, which just happens so infrequently.
It's insane. When you go back, and I know we're doing a lot of game log watching today because it's interesting once you have 17 weeks of data, or getting into week 17, I should say 16 total, where you're looking at it, it's like he's got the 31, the 29, then the 4. And then it's like, oh, there's another 31, another 29. You just go down. It's just he's boom, bust. And that's what you want in these tournaments, and especially on an 8-game slate. So build accordingly. If he does that, and it's because of them going up first, or maybe it's now Aaron Rodgers on the comeback, again, you don't need to set it up this way. You can also just play James Cook. You could play James Cook with the Buffalo defense. The D, was fine last week, even allowing 21 points last week, actual points. They still put up 14 DraftKings. So it's the D can still show up here. They're 3,600. I kind of like them better with Cook, just to be like, that's the game plan. That's how it plays out. And then the D just clamps down on Aaron Rodgers and co.
Introducing the TGL presented by SoFi, golf's newest league, live on ESPN and ESPN Plus. It's sharp and it's electric. How is it sharp? How is it electric? Picture this. 2 hours of hammer-dropping, overtime-forcing, playoff on-the-line golf, with 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour, like Tiger and Rory and more, split into 6 teams: Atlanta, Boston, Jupiter, LA, New York, the Bay. This isn't your average Sunday pickup game. To learn more, visit tglgolf.com and tune in to the inaugural season beginning January 7th. Keep up. It's golf. What game would you like to go to next? Because the rest of the games kind of suck. You have Indy and the Giants. So Anthony Richardson's going to be pretty high up. I mean, he was the optimal quarterback that we went through. Downs is still super cheap. You just have to pray that Jonathan Taylor doesn't steal everything from them in this game. Or hell, play all 3 of them together, and hopefully the Giants really have packed it in for the season. I don't even know who you would play on the other side. I'd probably play Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, I guess my question was going to be what we're doing with this guy, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, the week before last, it was just he couldn't hang on to the ball when he crossed the line, but then he made up for that in quite a surprising fashion last week. I definitely wasn't expecting 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, but another really good matchup here against the Giants. But it looks like a lot more people are going to be on Saquon for just a little bit more. And then Richardson, to me right now, looks like the highest owned quarterback on the slate. So the two games for me, I mean, we could start there because we're already on it, but Indy at the Giants, then the other game I want to talk about, even though it's a 39.5 point total, it's not like this one's that much more, but the Tennessee Jacksonville game has pieces in it that I think are interesting and people are touching them. They're not going all the way in on them. So we'll talk about that more, but what do you want to talk about in this Indy one?
Well, nothing really. I don't even know who I want to play. It would either be Jonathan Taylor by himself or Richardson with Downs. That's kind of it. I mean, frankly, it's the Colts defense that I think everyone wants a piece of.
Yeah, we thought that last week and it didn't end up happening. And it was a product of the slate as the week went on, but I know you and I both were thinking that at 3K they were going to be super popular. I ended up looking at it later in the week and they just weren't. I just didn't think the next step, the progression of if you're not on Richardson, if you are interested in the D, why not put it together with Jonathan Taylor and get the 40 plus points that he put up? But I like the Indy D here again at 3,500. They're $100 less than Buffalo. I'm not sure if that changes things or if people care or how that shakes out, but I think it's fine. And I like the call, like Jonathan Taylor or flip to that passing game. Anything on the Giants side that you can do something with here?
No.
I'm just looking at like for value. There's just not a ton of, I guess it's going to be the
Tracy.
Carolina guys are going to be value. But again, Robinson,
No.
11, 9, and 12 targets in the last 3, only $4,400. It's a value play. He's not getting ownership.
But how many fantasy points is he scoring with all those targets? Like, you have to remember those targets are coming from Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito. They're not high quality.
No, but usually for him, I mean, you can rack up a quick, what does he usually get? Like 8 for 40? Because he just catches it and falls on it. And so it goes that way. But I just don't know. There's not a ton of value on this slate. He is $400 less than Downs. So I wouldn't hate like a Jonathan Taylor Robinson secondary stack, but I don't love a lot of things in this game. Like you're kind of just, it falls together on its own already based on what you talked about. And then you're just building out from there. But I feel like we're going to have more secondary stacks out of this game. And that's why I brought it up. Because the other shells that we're on, we're going to want to plug in pieces from this spot.
I think we just go one-off Jonathan Taylor with Colts D. And if you do want to go back to the Colts, like, you can use Downs by himself if you want to.
I'm with you. That's what I prefer more as of right now. Richardson it's not that I don't prefer him. Say he'll definitely be in there, but he's the most popular right now. And it's kind of, you know what you're doing with him. You can play him naked or you can stack him with one of Downs or somebody else, but you're just trying to make things work and fit together. So it's all going to be how your builds come together. I like what you talked about there with going back to the well on Taylor. And the one nice thing about Taylor is it's always the same, Pat. There's no way he can do that again. But guess what? He doesn't have to do that again. We talk about this all the time. If he gets you 100 yards and a touchdown, that's still usually a pretty good week. Maybe a catch or two, like a small number, but he doesn't need 200 yards and 3 touchdowns to be needed on an 8-game slate. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Well, we can play Jonathan Taylor with Colts D, and then I went to the other game that you talked about, the Tennessee-Jacksonville game, and started filling this in. The best points per dollar quarterback on the slate almost is Mason Rudolph at $5,000. So if you plug in Rudolph with Ridley and Chig, which I think would be the way that we'd go about it, you have 5,000, 55, and 36, and then just bring back Brian Thomas at 68 with Jonathan Taylor and Colts D, and we still have $5,900 to play with.
Yeah, remember that when we get to this shell, but that's the shell I was looking at. When I said earlier, like about this game, and I mentioned, I said, I feel like people are touching on it. They're getting to Brian Thomas Jr. there at 6,800 still. He's fine. He's amazing every single week, actually. So there's that. They're not really interested in running backs. And it seems, I don't know, do you see the same? But if anybody's going anywhere to quarterback in this one, it actually seems like they would go to Mac Jones before Mason Rudolph, but I don't know if you're seeing the same.
I just don't see anyone really going to many pieces of this game in general outside of like the really big ones that we've talked about. Like, yeah, of course we're going to get, Mac Jones I have at 9%, Mason Rudolph I have at 6%. Like, I see no distinction between those two guys. Just give me the cheaper guy who's lower owned.
Yeah, I'm good with Rudolph coming off of Christmas. We got a chance here with Mason, and he's going to be fine going up. I like the Chig play. Again, it doesn't look like, again, this game is just, like I said, the reason I call it touch, it's getting grazed, like 6% here, 7% there. Maybe he gets to 9% on this guy. We know what's going on here is people are playing Brian Thomas and then, maybe Ridley, but I even have Ridley currently 10% or 12% behind him. So it's, people are hitting this up for a secondary stack, and I'm thinking maybe we should be hitting it up for the full game stack because Jacksonville has been the team to pass all over every single week. So I'm fine with the Mason Rudolph call.
The other one to look at is Brenton Strange for Jacksonville. Did pop up on the injury report. He is expected to play as of right now. Just throwing that out there. He is up to $4,000 on DraftKings this week. It's probably too much. He was fun when he was $2,600. 4,000 coming off a bad week. Maybe it's a spot for him, but I don't know if I like that.
What about Luke Farrell? Get him in there for 2,500. He even got 3 targets last week. So I don't know. We'll see how the injury slate goes, but the injury stuff goes for the slate. But that's something to think about if for some reason he was out. I doubt he will be, but just to see.
Any interest in Dallas and Philly with Kenny Pickett probably starting at quarterback?
That's fun. What are you thinking? Because I know Barkley's going to get love, and Dowdle's getting some on the other side, but it looks like pretty much everybody else is maybe Jake Ferguson, I should say, is getting some. But man, there is, like, with the injuries and stuff, and obviously Lamb out the rest of the season, all of that. There's a spot here, but it's still Dallas versus Philly. That's what makes it tricky. And I think I would lean more into the Dolphins-Browns game before I would lean into this one. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, both these games are tough. Like, I guess if you wanted to do like Pickett and AJ Brown, that would make a lot of sense to me, just because no one is playing either of those guys. And as of this recording, Jalen Hurts is not out as of yet, but they've made a lot of different moves to sign Ian Book to get him ready and prepared for this week to back up Kenny Pickett, who is also on the injury report. That it just really seemed to read the tea leaves that Jalen Hurts is probably not going to play. But just as I pointed out to kick off the show, like, Barkley's going to be owned, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be owned enough.
That's fair. I think, like I said, 8,600, it's just more of a product of that. But we've kind of talked through it. When you get to the quarterbacks that we mentioned, you have the money. So that's where I wonder, just as the week goes on, does his ownership just continue to climb because he's so easy to get to, right? Once you look at those shells that we built, you can pretty much put Barkley into all of them, right?
You can, and you could pair him up with someone on the other side. Like, I mean, I'm starting to sound like cussed here, but I don't hate Kevontae Turpin. They're actively giving him opportunities to score touchdowns.
Yeah, I think if people are going there, they're going to go to Ferguson for a secondary stack just to use up the tight end, and he's $3,700, but the ownership reflects that anyway. So I like the original optimal the best. I liked Philly with the D, and then Barkley. That's what I was interested in.
I mean, just you can get away with Turpin, I think, because instead of using the onesie at tight end, maybe you can still use Chig for $3,400 too and save money that way. Or you could actually pay up for one of the tight ends that, I don't know, is Brock Bowers really going to be, 19% owned? I really don't think so.
Well, we got to look at that game anyway, so we can move there with that segue, because it's the one it's got a low total, but it's also in New Orleans, and it's teams and guys that we've been talking about this season, like wanting to play Brock Bowers, wanting to go to Jacoby Myers, Aiden O'Connell. I know it's Rattler, and that's why nobody wants to go there, but what if it's something else, right? And what if you just go the Raiders side? That's the other thing. So what are you doing with this game? Because it's a tougher one to think about how you're handling it, but the Vegas side at least looks somewhat interesting.
I don't know who to use in the backfield because, I mean, it's funny because we had spoken about Amir Abdullah and he eventually got there, which was hilarious, but he really shouldn't have because it was all Alexander Madison all the time until they got down in that game. And then they started to pass with Amir Abdullah and it worked and they ended up winning the game. I don't know if it's going to change back to that. Like, do they have to get down before they start using him, or will they just ride Madison if it's a close game or they're up in a game where they probably should be up a lot of the time? And on the other side of the ball, like, it looks like Olave might be back.
Yeah, is he going to be, though? I saw that too.
He's practicing in full.
Okay. So that would be the most intriguing or just interesting way, is going to, like, just go back to the well, man. Like, look, everyone's over it now. Go back to O'Connell, Myers, Brock Bowers, and then run it back if you want to run it back with someone like him, because that's really I don't want to be picking between Dante Pettis, Kevin Austin Jr., Cedric Wilson Jr., and these guys. So I would either not run it back or risk it on Olave if he's playing and good to go, and get some coach speak on that. I don't want to try and pick between Madison and Abdullah on this slate either.
I think we just use Kendry Miller. Use O'Connell with Bowers and Kendry Miller because Kamara's not playing. I mean, he might play, but he's not playing.
I don't think he is either, but Miller didn't show me anything that excited me. He barely played. Like, that was bad.
He barely played, but they also got down by 20 points within like 10 minutes, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll throw to him." So it's very clear that if you think that the Raiders get up by a ton in this game, and I don't think that we're saying that necessarily. I think that if you do target this game, you target the concentration offensively of the Raiders' passing game and hope everything else kind of comes along with it. Like, I doubt this is a 35-30 game, but O'Connell and Bowers can get there by themselves with 21 points.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. Like, I guess if I'm doing that, Pat, I would like O'Connell, Bowers, and Miller or something like that, where it's like, okay, this is back and forth. Because of that, Miller actually holds value. And then your guy like Bowers or something, gets you a different build because you're not paying down at tight end. I guess you could go Myers and use one of the cheap tight ends still if that gets us more money to do more things. But that's fine. I'm good with that build as well if you wanted to shell it out that way.
That leaves us one game to talk about, and I don't even really want to talk about it all that much. Achane, that's it. Ford, maybe.
What it looks like, yeah. What else would you do here? I don't know.
I guess I want to see about Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's been limited in practice all week. There's a chance he doesn't play. If he doesn't play, fire up some Jameis and the Browns receivers.
Yes, that would change it. But right now, like, any interest at all on the Dolphins side outside of HN? Like,
If
Tyreek, or...
I would have interest in Malik Washington as one of the punt plays that's not Coker or McMillan or Wendell Robinson or Turpin, but only if Waddle ends up sitting again, which it looks like he is, just because he kind of filled that role to a T. Like, that's exactly where he needed to be, and he's only $4,000.
You know what's funny is he did nothing last week, pretty much nothing, and his price went up. He was 3,700 last week. Now he's 4K. Shorter slate, maybe. That's why I don't know. But
yeah, I mean, they didn't do much last week because in the second half, they were just able to run the ball and dump it off to Achane the entire time. But 6 targets 2 weeks ago, 4 targets last week, all with Waddle out of the game. Like, at least he's involved in this offense a little bit. And there's going to be a max amount of pressure coming in at Tua. I mean, I just don't like this game from an offensive standpoint anyway. I think it's going to be most of the Dolphins games are short passing anyway. This one's going to be especially low ADOT.
I was going to say that. And I think also, too, if I landed here as a one-off, depending on how popular HN actually gets, right now he looks very popular, then I would be fine if you just landed on another one-off, because I think it could be a spot where you're in the right place on the wrong guy, and you just have to have somebody, like you mentioned, maybe it's Malik Washington a week after, everybody wanted him as a value play, and now nobody wants him. We've seen that with guys like the Patriots, Kayshon Boutte, whatever his name is. That guy, he was popular for weeks as a random made-up value play that people were just like, oh, there's no value, let's make him the value. And then last week goes on and crushes when nobody's playing him. So I'm always fine with that, especially if it's going to be a leverage play to HN at the running back position, because there is other running backs on the slate like we talked about. Yeah, what about Ford, quickly, who you mentioned?
Yeah, I don't mind Ford, but when they got to the goal line last week, they ended up giving it to Foreman 3 times, then Ford, and then Ford fumbled. So I don't know what's going on with their goal line situation. If he's not going to be in the game on the 2-yard line trying to score a touchdown, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson might just take that away from him if he plays and run it in himself, I don't know if there's like max value. He had all of his fantasy points last week on 1 run.
Yes. I was going to say that stood out as well. So, okay, I'm good with this game. Moving on.
All right, that's all the games.
Build.
All right, let's go back to the game the 2 games that I think that we all kind of need to coalesce around. We have this overstack of Tampa and Carolina. So the lineup itself looks like Mayfield, Hubbard and Bucky, Evans and Coker, and Payne Durham to fill up that 2,900 at tight end. This is without McMillan, who I would assume is going to be fairly popular. What else do we do here? Because we can throw in a D, and it seemed like Green Bay's D. If we're not going to touch that game, Green Bay's D seems to be the D that we would have to go to at 27. It saves a bunch of money. It makes a lot of sense to me. But are there any other cheap Ds that you would look at, like the Raiders at 2,600 against Rattler?
Yeah, definitely see that. Let me see what else I got here. The Raiders is one for sure. They are probably going to pick up steam as the week goes on because they're priced very affordably. So if you look at them, they're very affordable. The other one was
the Browns against Tua.
Cleveland. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Let's do that. So if we do that and we put in the Browns D for $2,400, that leaves us $6,150 for a receiver and a flex in this lineup. What do you think is the best route to go here?
How come I can't find Coker? How much is Coker again? I was trying to fill
43.
the difference. And what do you have left? 30.
I have
Okay,
I have 6150 left.
Can we get to your secondary stack that you liked? You can get a Turpin Barkley like you wanted,
Can
and
you?
then bump up the D.
Oh yeah, Turpin, and you
I
can
think
bump
you
it.
can
You
get
can,
to
you
can we
can
get to
bump.
Vegas?
You can get up to Packers D.
Okay. How much was Vegas? Yeah,
Vegas.
why don't you put yeah, I guess so, because you're not on Minnesota, so it's nice to leverage Aaron Jones, but you also could have said, because you said off the top you didn't want any Saints, you were really against them, so you could also play Vegas there if you wanted them instead. So yeah, either D, that lineup fits, has everything covered that we talked about, and then it's kind of just going to where, whatever D you choose at the end.
Well, it's funny because we spoke last week about Atlanta's D, and that if you weren't going to play anyone from the Penix side, and because it was so cheap, and did everyone end up going to it? I didn't even look at the ownership. Did that end up being like the Penix, London, Mooney, like those combinations, and with Bijan end up being popular?
Mainly just Penix, right? Penix was super owned everywhere he was at. He was up to like 18% in some of the smaller field stuff, 20% pushing it in the other places, but not really stacking him. No, not many got to it.
But we spoke about how does this game go wrong for Penix? I mean, A, he could suck. That could be one way. Or the Atlanta D just does all the scoring, and then he can't actually do anything, and that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. So that's fine. That's always fine anyway, though. It's like I said, that's why this lineup is kind of cool, because it lands on a defense. Either or makes sense. Green Bay, really good defense, especially at that price, and going up against Darnold, who we're not on, but also Aaron Jones on this slate, who's super popular, and we're moving away from him. So that makes sense. And then on the flip side of it is you didn't like any Saints, and it's Rattler. So if you went there, you could also do that as well. So I wouldn't even mind either of those defenses in this lineup, but the rest of it makes a ton of sense.
All right, let's enter that one. Next one is a Sam Darnold lineup. It's Darnold with Jefferson, Addison, and Romeo Doubs. And we have 4780 remaining to fill out 2 running backs, a tight end, a flex, and a defense.
Jefferson, Addison, Doubs. Just always, you got the tab saved. I'm rebuilding over here, so we're
Yep.
good. Okay. As far as running back goes, then you're looking at it from, we've got some money, but do you want to put Bucky? Do you want to move around on Tampa? Like, what are you thinking now from these other games that we were looking at? Is kind of Carolina, Tampa Bay, and then Indy and the Giants, and Tennessee and Jacksonville. So where do you want to start here?
Wish I liked Jacksonville guys more. Like, do you have a preference between Bigsby and ETN, or just none?
They'll end up being potential leverage plays on it. Like, I think that's kind of the key here. If I look down just to see on my end.
Bigsby's 52. So you could go like Bigsby Chig and save a bunch of money.
If you're not, are you playing Bucky here or not? I think that's the next decision.
We might. We can see. Like, let's throw in a D. Let's throw in the Packers D. Actually, probably we don't want to play the Packers D in this line. Let's throw in Vegas D, or you know what? We'll throw in Colts D for. Let's use Colts D for this moment. If we do that, we use Chig with Bigsby, 52 and 36, and a $3,500 D. That leaves us $5,800 for a running back and a flex. So if we used Bucky's 67. And that leaves us $4,900 for a flex, which would have to be a receiver. And it gets tough all of a sudden. You could use Christian Watson if he ends up playing. Josh Downs is 48. That might be the move.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see here what else you got for running back. Like, who would be the next up? If you're not using the Vegas D, would you play Miller at all?
No,
it's not about what you have money for. My takeaway is same as always with this. When we do it, is like, Bigsby would not even be in my decision range when we get to this point. It would have been the shell and then Bucky and then start filling it out, because we don't want Bigsby, and he's what's making the 2v2 tough. Even though it seems like the fact we added Bucky is we have cheap defenses. Like, we can easily take the Colts down to Vegas. We can play Bucky because he makes perfect sense, and now build out that way. We now have 5,500 for a running back and a flex, even if we keep Chig in there. Right? You don't have to have a Jacksonville guy. It's just kind of sticking with those games. What was the Indy guy that we liked? You said Downs we could just use on his own?
Yeah, we could use Downs on his own at 49, but that brings us to I kept in Bucky, I kept in Chig, I took Bigsby out. That leaves us a running back and a flex for $5,000. So that's not great in this situation.
Yeah, I'm pulling Colts out of there though. Like, we're not playing a Saint, so I'm just getting that. I'm getting almost $1,000 back right now. And looking at upgrades, because clearly we need it. That's what the Bigsby version showed us, is like, we need a little bit of money here. we're not super high on that anyway. Can we get to like Jonathan Taylor? No, then you need someone really cheap, so that's not happening. What about
We can get to Hubbard. You can use Hubbard and Malik Washington.
yeah, there you go. Because you're not playing Achan. So far, the best version is this.
Let's try to see here. Who's at
It's about
$4,000?
7 points off the optimal, and you could have played like Wicks as a overstack here. You could play, I don't know, I don't love these guys, but like Lazard is there, Mitchell, Trey Tucker, I guess. But I kind of like the Washington call because you're not playing Achan. You're not playing a Saint. You got the D against them. You've got your 3-1 stack that you like. And then you've landed on, the back and forth of Bucky and Chuba, which, by the way, has been the thing, Pat. We saw Dowdle versus Chuba, and then we saw Connor versus Chuba, and they, both weeks, those kind of came through, right? Chuba actually didn't do well against Dowdle that week, but the matchup of playing those running backs against each other has worked out. So I don't hate that build.
The only other way that you could go into this is you could downgrade Vegas D to Browns D, and that would free up an extra $200, which could get you David Moore if you wanted to. AD Mitchell is there. Pierce looks like he'll be back in this week. I think he passed concussion protocol, so he is 4,700, so he wouldn't actually fall into this. But he's another option that you could potentially go to there. Juwan Jennings, obviously the optimal liked. But overall, there's just not that many options. Jake, would this be a double tight end lineup? Or do you just say, screw it, punt down? I don't know if this gets us anyone, but let's say we take Chig down to Payne Durham. And now we have $4,700 left for a flex. That opens up some better options. Like we could get back to Downs if we drop Raiders to Browns. Or we could use Alec Pierce or Njoku or one of those guys, Jalen McMillan. I mean, we don't want to have $3 and that's it. But I think doing it with Payne Durham and Bucky Irving makes more sense than adding in another guy here.
Yeah, the one I like that you'd landed on was actually just a talking point from just these type of slates, especially with 8 games. When you dropped down to the Browns with Chig, you had a $2,400 Browns and Chig at $3,600. I believe it left us 4,200. And we had Malik Washington in the previous one. I get it, like with Waddle and that situation, but I would definitely, if I landed there, I'm already using Cleveland against Achan because I'm not playing Achan. I would play Parker Washington for 4,200 because I'm not on Brian Thomas. And that's when it's what I try and explain to people where it's not even about the play. Like, oh, you're an idiot. It's Parker Washington. Fine. I don't care though, because the build leads me to it. And he's a huge leverage play against Thomas. He's had 6 targets each of the last 2 weeks. Mac Jones is throwing him the ball. So I wouldn't care if it made everything else make sense. And we have a lot of action in this lineup for an 8-game slate where just some of these natural leverage pieces I'd be fine landing on. Same as you did with Washington, the previous one. Do we love Malik Washington? No, but if we're not playing Achan, he makes sense. I'm good with it.
So, or we can go from Chig down to Durham and play Downs as the flex with Browns D.
Yeah. Again, like to me, Durham is just a filler, so that's fine. I don't expect him to do much, but yeah, he certainly fits because of the spot here, and we'll have to wait and see on the news. But I like the build you had with Washington. It was about 7 points off the optimal, and it still made a lot of sense from all the other perspectives that we've been talking about. What's the next, Shell?
Well, the only other thing we could do is like punt Jefferson or Addison and put in either Naylor or Hawkinson for the Minnesota side. That's the only other option I think we have.
Yeah, I'm always fine with the Hawkinson. Do like Addison Hawkinson and leave Jefferson out of it and just hope that he doesn't have a good game. That would definitely get us filling a position, using the money differently. What could that get us to if we just go back here quick then? Let's do it. So let me go just Addison only. What was the original? Because then we don't need Chig.
And we'll put in Hawkinson.
Yeah,
and we'll take out Parker Washington. We'll take out Browns D.
I'm still good with Dobbs.
So we have Darnold, Hubbard, Irving, Addison, Romeo, and TJ Hawkinson. Now we have 4660 left. So again, you throw in, let's say, Raiders D this time. Now you have 57 for a flex and a wide receiver. It's around kind of the same, to be honest with you.
It just depends on the other value play. Like we need one more value play is what we need here. Who was the guy you said earlier? Turpin. The one thing I will say for sure, I guess this is my takeaway, is like I don't like Hubbard anymore. And the only reason is because when you're popping out Jefferson, I need to go find Justin Jefferson. And for me, obviously it could be Chuba Hubbard, but I prefer to be like, this gets me to Barkley. And then it's like Barkley, Turpin, and you have 6,400 remaining for like a Brees Hall or a Tony Pollard. I guess don't love it, but
Okay,
yeah, my point would be,
how about this? How about we take Hubbard out and change him with Barkley for 86, and then in lieu of having Hubbard in to go with Bucky Irving, we just use Coker at $4,300, and then we can use Calvin. Then we can use Calvin Ridley as our flex.
Can you?
Yeah, 55.
55. Yeah, that's way nicer. That's definitely way nicer. And it projects well. It's only about 6 points off the optimal. So you get your 3-1, you get your Barkley instead of your Jefferson. You're kind of just changing the lineup construction a little bit. You're using your tight end in Hawkinson to go with your quarterback. You get the Bucky, Coker, and I liked your call earlier. Coker's going to be good. Well, on paper, he's going to play no matter what. It might only get better from the perspective of maybe opening things up, but either way, he's fine. And then you still kept Dobbs. You still get a guy like Ridley, and you land on the D against New Orleans. So I don't think we're missing anything here. I feel pretty good about a build like this.
All right, let's get that one in there. So on the other side of the ball, we went with Jordan Love, Aaron Jones, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Tucker Kraft. So a Packers onslaught here with Aaron Jones coming back. We could even punt Aaron Jones out of this and use, I don't know, we could use Addison in this lineup if we wanted to.
If you had to, I think this is the key, though, of it's not who you play, it's how you play. And people are going to hate on this Jones chalk as the week goes on. And it's like, this is definitely the way to use it. Because can you still just try and build this straight up? Like, can you get Bucky in this?
Bucky, yep. And then you use
Can we get the Colts D with our guy, Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, I think that we can, as long as we punt off the last spot. Yeah, $4,600 for a receiver. I mean, Coker fits in there. You can have McMillan, Brendan Cooks, Nick Westbrook-Ikena, Coleman. We'll see if Leggett plays. We don't know about that. Coker, Parker Washington, David Moore. Like, there's a bunch of guys here.
I want to see, though. I think I might have found it. I think we might be able to get to Downs. How much is Coker? Is Coker 43?
40.
Yeah, I found the lineup.
All right, what is it?
You put in Coker. Coker's the secondary stack, and then it gets you Barkley with Philly D. That's a great lineup.
Instead of who?
Instead of JT and Colts, you can go to you just go to Barkley and Philly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that works out.
I thought it might get us up to. I was really trying to get. Can I find 4,900? I guess if you don't want Coker, I like the build we just put. You can keep that. But if you went down back to your Downs call from earlier, which I like, where you just play Downs as he is, that also gets you to the Vegas defense, and that projects the best. So if you pop Coker out now,
hold on, I'm gonna put this one back in. So I
rehash it. Yeah,
I pop out Coker for Downs, and then Philly
to get a piece of Indy, and then just don't worry about pairing the D with Barkley and go with Vegas D. You kind of cover a lot of angles here because you got Green Bay, Minnesota, you got some Tampa Bay, Carolina. You don't have Coker anymore, but you got the Philly spot. You got Vegas going up against Rattler, and then you got a little bit of the Anthony Richardson spot via Josh Downs, right? So you get all of that. You're just missing Tennessee, Jacksonville, but are you really missing anything of like the Chig roulette wheel? You just don't have Brian Thomas. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay.
And
let's get that.
Let's get. I like that. I like that build. I mean, those type of builds are fine. It projects about 5 off the optimal.
All right, so this is the last one to fill out. It's Rodgers with Devontae Adams and James Cook. So the low-owned lineup. So we just try to go chalk to fill this in. We'll go Bucky. Should we leave Bucky out of some of these?
It's all it's saying is make sure you have some Baker Mayfield stacks, some Mike Evans, get some stacks in there where you can, everything we just did with the Jordan Love lineup, you can do with Baker Mayfield, like the Baker, Evans, McMillan. If you want to add Payne Durham, do it. Max Payne, put him in there too. You know what I mean? You can do that no problem and leverage Bucky. So just that's how you should be thinking about your portfolio is if you got multiple lineups, don't just jam Bucky in all of them. If you're not comfortable, if you start to feel uncomfortable with it, move it to the other side and you can get some leverage that way. But yeah, this one, what do you do here? So it's, we talked about Bucky. Do you want to do Coker with them?
Yeah, so I just chucked in a bunch of dudes. You can actually just put in Garrett Wilson to fill this one out. So here's how I ended up with it. I didn't use Bucky. I used Evans instead of Bucky. And I used Hubbard at running back to go with James Cook.
Okay.
So Rodgers, Cook, Hubbard, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans. I used Turpin just to save some money, Chig to save some money, Brown's D, but that actually gets you Garrett Wilson to go along with this stack too.
And Brown's D, you said, right, to round it out?
Yeah.
So this one's about 16 off the optimal, and it's mainly just because we have Rodgers and Turpin and, some of these other guys are a bit
bad
of
players.
Fillers. Yeah, the stretch is like, how do we get there? It's like, I think you got to go back to, like, let's just flip this for a second to show how we can improve projection. Again, how people want to play it. This still makes sense, so it's fine. But if you go Chuba to Bucky, and then you take Evans, can you get, you're very close to Barkley now, so you kind of got to drop Wilson or Adams. Who do you want to drop? Wilson, probably?
Let's drop Wilson to Downs, I guess.
Yep.
And then you can have Barkley, but you have 500 left over. So you can either go up in D to that Packers D, since we didn't touch that game anyway, or you can take Downs and or Turpin up $500.
Did you like any of those Ds at 2,900, 28? Like, are you interested at all in, like...
I mean, I think Saints D is interesting because no one really seems to be going there. Everyone is playing the cheaper Vegas defense, and everyone likes Vegas in that game. That who says that the Saints can't just beat them? Or the Titans can't just beat up on the Jags?
Yeah, I guess the other the talk would be here too. If you wanted to go to Green Bay, you don't have Aaron Jones or any Minnesota. You could just leave the money, and it still projects like 4 points better than what we had.
I'm just trying to see if there's anyone in that low $5,000 range at wide receiver we could use. So it's Romeo Doubs as a one-off, Amari Cooper. We don't have quite enough for Calvin Ridley, and it's Olave who's on injured reserve and might end up playing. So I'm okay with this, just paying up at D a little bit more, getting a little bit different. We haven't used Saints D, so let's use Saints D.
Yeah, I like the Saints D. I want to see one more quick move, and then I'll run it by you. We're $300 short. Is there a tight end that's 3,300?
I mean, Payne Durham's 2,900.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if we could fit this bill. I was trying to get Bucky, but like a sneakier move with Bucky, and it's probably switching the quarterback and just changing the build. But if people are going to play a lot of Bucky, another thing you can do, Pat, is it was like with Gibbs last week. A lot of people played Gibbs, but not many had two running backs stacked on top of him, meaning Bucky 6,700. I was looking like Bucky, JT, and Barkley, and then seeing what that looks like. You know what I mean?
Well, here we can try that out to see what that looks like.
What happens if we just keep Adams in? How much is Adams? Is 61 or 70?
You wanted Bucky and Barkley?
I wanted Bucky, JT, and Barkley.
Okay, so we can do this. We just have to make Brian Thomas, Parker Washington, and then it works. So we can just go to the next, the Mason Rudolph lineup we had. So you make it Mason Rudolph with Calvin Ridley and Chig. Parker Washington is the bring back, and then you can go Bucky, JT, and Barkley with Colts D, and then you have $5,000 for a receiver, which is probably Josh Downs.
Okay, let me look at this one. So it's Rudolph, and then it was Ridley. I just want to see the projection on it. And then the other guy we got in that game was Washington, which is fine because we're not on Thomas, Chig, etc. And then what D did you roll with?
I rolled Colts D, but we don't have to. We can roll anyone out there.
We could roll Buffalo here now, right?
We could roll Buffalo. Yeah, we could roll Buffalo if we wanted to.
Yeah, we just moved off the Jets. It makes sense to me. Yeah, this lineup's nice. So this projects about 7 points off the optimal, but it's got some good leverage in it, and it still is a 3-1 stack. The other thing, though, is like if you drop Buffalo and Washington, you can't get to Brian Thomas, can you?
No,
Too
you
much?
can't. No. But what you could do is drop the Bills down to like the Browns or Vegas and upgrade Josh Downs by like $1,000-ish. And you would have your choice of, I guess, like Thielen, Shakir. There's no one really there is the problem.
Yeah, it's tough. I see what you're saying here now. It's like this is just even going to the next layer of we were already going to look at Rudolph lineups and how you had them set up. And it makes perfect sense, but it is actually trickier than you think to fit in these running backs. You kind of got to have someone lower now. I guess maybe you just don't get Barkley in them. What does that look like? Like if you take Downs out of it.
Like if you turn Barkley into who? Like who are we turning Barkley into at running back? Do we turn him into, like, we didn't use A-Chain in any of these lineups. I'm fine with that, even though he's going to score 20 points. Looking for something more. Maybe it's Chuba.
That's what I was trying to do, is just look at that. But even then, you get pretty tight on the cash flow.
Let's see.
I guess 6,400. You're kind of in good shape here.
So you turn Barkley into Chuba in the flex. Where the hell did he go? I press down, Barkley into Chuba, and then you can take out Downs and make Downs 65 at receiver. That gets you up to like Addison, Garrett Wilson. But if you drop down the Bills defense, you could potentially get another $1,000 or $1,200 and get yourself up to, I guess you don't want to use CeeDee Lamb, but Devontae Adams would be there. A.J. Brown would all come back into the mix. I think I just like it with the Downs and Barkley.
Yeah, but I thought we couldn't get to Barkley because Downs is 48, right?
No, we can get to Barkley with Bills D.
Oh, yeah. That I already saved that build. I was on to the next one. My bad. I see what you're doing now. I see it up on the screen. I was looking at two screens. Okay. So, yeah, what I was saying, Pat, was when you had the original shell, save that lineup now, like you had it. I like that version for sure. Wasn't the original shell Rudolph, Ridley, Chig with Brian Thomas?
It was, yes.
Okay, that's where I was trying to figure out the difference of what it would be. And it would be like you have to drop to the Vegas D in it, and then you get Jonathan Taylor and Downs instead of Barkley.
So if you drop to Vegas D, so you drop to Raiders.
Yes.
And that means Brian.
Then I change.
So Brian Thomas is back in, not Parker Washington, and Barkley is out. So who's in the Barkley spot?
Hubbard.
Okay. And that leaves us Downs at 49?
Yeah, it leaves you $100 and Downs, but it projects really well, and you're playing a bit of a combo pack there. It's kind of expensive for Downs and Jonathan Taylor, but it's not the worst. How much is Richardson?
I was gonna say you could use that $100 to get Raiders up to Packers, since we have no Packers or Vikings.
That's good too. Actually, good call. Yeah, I like those ones. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off there. You can go to the next one, but that was just what I was looking at.
This is the last one.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know if you wanted to build Aiden O'Connell's. No. I didn't think so.
I don't.
All good. Do you want to look at the 3-gamer?
Yeah, let's do that on a separate show. How about that? We'll break them up. If you're listening to the audio podcast, then you will have an extra 3-game slate breakdown for Saturday. So, leave that rating and review. You can try to get a free entry into the one and done, or you can just buy an entry, screenshot it to me, and then that's an easier way with more giveaways to be had for the one and done on that. Code Mayo at Underdog will get you that $1,000 deposit bonus. Plus, actually, I wrote down some underdog plays. I'll have a full video probably early on Saturday morning about this. But I like Jacobs over receptions, Bucky Irving over yards, Kincaid under receiving yards, and Turpin over rushing attempts and or yards, whatever they give you, because they like lining. They now line up Turpin as a running back and give him carries. So I always enjoy that.
That's your boy this week, Kevontae Turpin week.
We'll see. I don't know how much it is, but for $3,400, maybe we'll see. It's probably better off playing Chig and Payne Durham together or something like that. Like, I like Chig at the price point more, but if you can fill in your wide receiver spot to get Barkley, maybe it's worth it if you can't get to him otherwise. Either way, runthesims.com. You can check out dfsmastermind.com for all Tambo's strategy, and Ship It Nation code Mayo will work over there as well. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
That Mayo experience! Experience!